the purpose of studying the patterns of circulation in Mother Nature. When we look around, everything is in solid shapes. Not only living organisms like flowers, trees, and cats, but also non-living things like rocks, the moon, and paper are all solid shapes. Upon closer look, there are clear patterns within them. Patterns can be found in the texture, leaf veins, and even in the spreading roots of trees on the ground. Patterns exist in the way the moon changes its shape little by little every day. Patterns are the structure and rule of nature that have been made over a long time. As a result, we can say that much information about the creation and destruction of nature within patterns. Some patterns are clearly visible to the eye. On the other hand, there are times that some patterns do not seem to exist because the phenomenon is so irregular despite the fact they actually do have patterns. Patterns are also in the morning sunrise and sunset in the evening, and the repetitions of the moon's phases every month. However, specific patterns become difficult to reveal in the ever-changing weather. Change of human emotions is also often ambiguous, thereby making it hard to identify a pattern. To discover the secrets of nature, it is necessary to know the structure of nature, expressed in the world of chemistry, and the world of invisible of force and law, expressed by physics. But what is the reason why patterns that actually exist in nature are not easily visible to our eyes? Not only humans but also nature is always changing. Even at this very moment, the countless number of lives are born while others die and disappear simultaneously. Rivers flow into the ocean, while a massive amount of water evaporates from the ocean. Living organisms and non-living things that compose nature have a close relationship where they endlessly affect each other. If a problem occurs to one component, it influences the entirety of nature. This distinct characteristic of nature makes it even harder to discover patterns in nature. How does the wind start? What patterns does the wind follow? The equator gets the most solar heat, polar regions, in contrast, get the least solar heat. At the equator, warm air rises to the top, which creates an empty space. To fill this space, the cold air flows from the polar regions. This is how the wind starts. We call this process atmospheric circulation. The atmospheric circulation that covers the entire Earth's surface is called atmospheric general circulation. There are three types of atmospheric general circulation: trade winds, westerlies, and polar easterlies. Trade winds blow between the equator and 30 degrees parallels. They appear as northeast trade winds in the northern hemisphere and as southeast trade winds in the southern hemisphere. Trade winds are named because they helped people navigate the ocean for trade. Westerlies are an atmospheric circulation blowing between 30 to 60 degrees parallels. Westerlies, which blow diagonally because of the Earth's rotation, pass the subtropical ocean, therefore they are warm and humid. Polar easterlies blow between 60 to 90 degrees parallels. Because they begin to blow from the polar regions, these winds are very cold. Why does the atmospheric general circulation have such complicated patterns? This is because the Earth rotates on its axis. You may have heard of Coriolis effect. Coriolis effect is a theory explaining that an object actually falls at a different location from expectation due to the Earth's rotation from west to east. The wind and ocean currents are all affected by the Coriolis effect. Oceanic circulation refers to the large-scale circulation of water that occurs out in the ocean. An ocean current is a flow of water moving in a constant direction and speed. The types of the ocean current may be divided into the surface ocean current and deep ocean current. The surface ocean current is the movement of seawater caused by the winds that continuously blow for a certain period of time or by the friction on the ocean surface. The representative winds that cause the surface ocean current are trade winds and westerlies. In particular, warm currents of the surface ocean current moves the warm water from the equator to areas in the high latitude to bring heat to cold regions. On the other hand, cold currents move cold water from the high latitude to the ocean in the low latitude, preventing the temperature in hot regions from rising so that the temperature would remain constant. Deep ocean current flows very deep in the ocean. This current is caused by density differences due to the changes in water temperature and salinity. When the area around Antarctica freezes, the salt that had been dissolved in the seawater escapes, increasing its density. Same goes for the waters around Greenland. When the cooling effect leads to the drop in temperature, the seawater increases in density. The high density of seawater caused by lower water temperature will sink downward in the high latitudes of the Atlantic Ocean. The seawater that sinks 200 meters below the ocean, known as deep water, flows across the equator to the other side of the Earth. Through the Antarctic Ocean circulation, the deep water reaches not only the Atlantic Ocean but also the Indian and the Pacific Ocean, distributing the Earth's heat evenly. What is the purpose of studying circulating patterns in Mother Nature? Once we understand unique designs that are traces of the creation and destruction, we can discover patterns, the flows of movements that fills nature and make up the big circulation. By figuring out the reason why patterns of nature are created, it is possible to take one more step closer to the secrets of nature. By discovering a pattern and its destruction, as well as the world of invisible force and law can be discovered, it is achievable to create a prediction program that can unlock the secrets on the creation and destruction of every living organism in nature, including humans. Mathematics is a study that can create something that can make humans happy. What is the logical basis that makes it possible to look into the cells of living organisms? In elements, Euclid said a dot does not have a size and a line does not have a width. Dots and lines in mathematics cannot be actually drawn into a picture, but can only be imagined in the head. In fact, everything around us is all solid figures. Things that are visible in a form are touchable. In such cases, they can be named. However, mathematics is a study that constantly provides names to things that do not have shapes. An atom, a basic unit that makes up matters, is a solid figure that has a thickness. Solid figures combine and create solid figures, revealing various patterns. Patterns can be found in not only animals and plants but also non-living things like snowflakes and rocks. Is it impossible to find a pattern if it is invisible? Even if the pattern is invisible, the hidden pattern may be discovered if we can draw it into a picture. How has nature been able to maintain its own shape all this time? It is because living organisms and non-living things organizing nature repeats the creation and destruction in following a certain rule. Patterns are the order of nature. As creation and destruction occur simultaneously in nature, discovering patterns in nature is difficult. To discover invisible patterns in nature, it is necessary to see the world from a higher dimension. It will be possible to see what the world really is about only when knowledge of humanities is acquired through reading. Humanities are a story about the creative life and holy death. If there were no light, would it be possible to see the traces of unique designs? Can living organisms exist without lights and colors? Colors are a way of survival for living organisms. Living organisms have to recognize and make lights on their own in order to survive and thrive. A unique color that living organisms have indicates that they have obtained the means to defaturing their competitors. Have you thought about why objects have certain colors? It is because of pigment molecules. Depending on which wavelengths of the visible light the pigment molecules reflect, penetrate, or refract, we see different colors. The color we see is typically the color of light reflected from an object. White paper reflects every color of lights, which makes them appear white. When we write with a blue pen on white paper, a certain pigment in the blue ink reflects the blue light and absorbs every other color, making it look blue. Sometimes, colors appear because a structure or pattern of an object reflects or scatters lights although there are no pigments. We see this in the rainbow color in soap bubbles or a layer of oil on a surface of the water. We call this appearance of color due to physical properties structural coloration. Water and oil are transparent, which means that they cannot absorb a certain color. However, when the layer has a certain thickness, it reflects a particular color to a stronger degree while reflecting other colors to a weaker degree when light passes through. Lights have their own wavelengths according to their color. This is called wavelengths of light. Blue light has a short wavelength and red light has a long wavelength. The film-like layer of oil or surface of a soap bubble is very thin, but depending on the location, its thickness differs, and the thickness shifts every moment. As a result, depending on when and where lights are reflected, they show rainbow colors of red, orange, and yellow, and so on. The fact that the structure of an object's surface determines structural coloration. For example, the color of a peacock's tail feather is structural coloration that is made by the interference of light. So, how is the structural coloration discovered? Humans have made many attempts to extract substances that make vivid colors from the beautiful wings of butterflies. They wanted to extract the colors and use them as pigments. But every attempt failed, and the concept of structural coloration was created in the process. They found out that although butterflies do not have color pigments on their wings, the colors appear because of the fine structure of the wings. A careful examination with the electron microscope that was later invented showed that butterfly wings were made of fine and delicate structures. Scientists realized that when light enters the structure, only a particular color reflects off strongly, revealing a structural pattern of colors caused by light. Living organisms in nature have various colors, with the coloration by pigments and structural coloration forming a harmony with each other. Even the feathers of colorful birds have structural coloration within. Using principles of structural coloration allow us to create advanced television with a more vivid display. Reflective display instantly reflects lights coming from outside and prints it on the display. This method is good for reducing energy consumption when generating light. Because it uses lights from outside for displaying images, it is also energy efficient. Further, we use the principles of structural coloration for preventing counterfeit money. A certain figure seems to move sideways when we move a paper note up and down. The figure seems to move up and down when we move the note sideways. The scientific reason behind this is that the ink that contains photonic crystal with a structure that allows its optical qualities to be used. After printing with the ink in an appropriate order, contacting it with a specific purpose magnet before the ink dries makes detailed and subtle changes to the marking's form and color. This way, we can make various forms as fractals, the structure of nature, or print particular logos. The use of nanoparticle arrangement rather than ink creates colors and patterns that cannot be counterfeited. In the case of non-living things, how does structural coloration appear? Why is milk white? Why is the sky so blue on a clear day? These phenomena result from scattering of light. Scattering of light refers to the way light spreading in various directions as it meets tiny particles on its way. We can see the form of light in the dust that is floating around by closing the curtains on a window where the light comes through. No matter how small a dust particle is, it distributes all the colors of light evenly, so it looks white. Milk also looks white because nutrients in the milk scatter the light evenly. However, interesting properties of light scattering starts to appear if the size of the particle is a lot smaller relative to dust or milk's nutrients. Nitrogen and oxygen molecules in the air are very small relative to dust. Due to the structure of atoms that make up these small molecules, they scatter only certain colors, while letting the rest pass through. Air molecules scatter the blue color the most, while not scattering other colors for the most part. So as the sun's light enters the atmosphere, only the blue color scatters, which makes the sky look blue. Water in a liquid state is transparent, so the light goes right through it. Water in a gaseous state, water vapor, disperses light. Because clouds scatter so much light, they look white. Also, light scatters when air bubbles get into ice, water in solid state. The same occurs for snow in the winter. If there is much scattering, things look white. Wavelengths differ depending on whether it is light from sun rays dispersing to make monochromatic rays or colored lights from light passing through colored glass. Visible ray, light that is visible to the human eyes, has a wavelength of 390 nm to 700 nm. Red light has a long wavelength while violet and blue wavelengths are short. By short wavelength, we mean that the light vibrates many times within a second. Even when traveling the same distance, blue light has to travel more than red light. The more the light travels, the higher the likelihood of crossing obstacles in the legs of the Earth's atmosphere. This results in a bigger amount of scattering. The reason the sky looks blue on a clear day is that the short blue light wavelengths scatter due to the nitrogen and oxygen molecules of the atmosphere. During sunset, the sunlight has to pass through the atmosphere that is thicker relative to that during the day as the altitude of the sun gets lower. Here, the blue light is scattered away in the atmosphere and fails to reach the ground. Only the red light, which has a long wavelength, reaches the ground, and we mostly see the reddish light. Within the beautiful colors of nature is the scientific principle of light scattering. Now, how could we utilize scattering of light? Convex lenses use the principle of refraction to collect light. It has already been over 3,000 years since we first understood this principle and invented lenses. However, recently we have been able to make lenses using the scattering of light. Using this principle, we can make lenses that have a resolution with a focus much smaller than light wavelengths. In other words, we can observe living cells as if looking through an electron microscope and became capable of making cells, individual components of electric circuits, of microscopic size, thereby increasing the performance of semiconductors. Proteins that have a fluorescent color are called fluorescent proteins. This protein has the characteristic of re-emitting the UV ray light they are exposed to. With the discovery of the gene sequence of green fluorescent protein at the end of the 20th century, it became possible to artificially synthesize it through genetic engineering. Since then, scientists began to actively utilize green fluorescent protein in life science. This protein plays a very important role when studying living organisms because it has the advantage that it can function independently. Green fluorescent protein consists of over 200 amino acids and it is relatively short in length. In addition, additional elements need not to be added to make the cells or living bodies fluorescent. Most proteins that are in charge of special functions in cells need additional elements to serve their functions. In contrast, green fluorescent protein obtains light and emits fluorescent color on its own. Then, what do we exactly mean by functions of fluorescence? Proteins affecting cells typically remain in their determined positions and function normally. To know the function of a protein body, we must first know its location within a cell. Green fluorescent protein plays an important role in this process. When the gene of green fluorescent protein is inserted into the gene sequence of a specific protein, we can easily see where and in what form the protein is within a cell. In other words, green fluorescent protein allows us to observe living cells. Previously, we could only observe protein in the steady state. However, the use of green fluorescent proteins to observe cells has allowed us to directly see the movement of proteins in cells or the reactions of cells to a certain stimulus. Moreover, since they are not toxic, cells can be observed without concerns over safety. Green fluorescent proteins combine with the proteins that construct the cell structure, so they are also used in the research of higher-level structures. This means that it goes beyond the dimension of unique designs, into the world of patterns. Using green fluorescent proteins, it is possible to dye and observe a specific protein among countless proteins that make up a cell. Thus, we can study the structure of cells or moving patterns of proteins. In particular, green fluorescent proteins can dramatically increase the success rate of the cancer surgery by making specific parts with cancer cells fluorescent. This way, doctors can remove only the cancerous tissues. We have mentioned the essence of mathematics repeatedly, but the first step to discovering the patterns that exist within the solids that make up nature is an observation of nature. Once we find a unique design within nature through observation of whatever exists in nature, this provides us with a clue to finding a pattern. It is not easy to find patterns in unique designs. This is why mathematicians use numbers and letters as the basis of find patterns in unique designs. Here, numbers and letters are the keys to opening the door to nature's secrets. The process of discovering the secrets of nature is like trying to find a way in a thick forest. Patterns have other patterns within them and simultaneously go through endless cycles of destruction. What would we need to recognize such complexity at first sight? We need to understand time and space. We need a higher perspective of looking at the world to set ourselves in the present, retrospect the past, and predict the future. How good would it be to conceptualize pattern and make it understandable in natural language? This idea may sound complex. Put simply, we can elevate our perspectives by reading a lot of books to understand people and places we do not live in. This allows us to make a prediction program that will unlock the secrets of the creation and destruction of living organisms that live in time and space. The myriad of patterns found in nature was not made just for aesthetics. Patterns are traces left by living organisms throughout their lives and a result of a long-term evolution to adapt to the environment. The reason why many life scientists go into nature rather than staying in laboratories to do research is to discover the secrets and patterns of living organisms. They have a true understanding of the fact that experiencing and learning about nature is the most important. Drug developers are no exception. Because patterns in nature are not artificially made by humans, they cannot escape the laws of nature. Patterns in living things are patterns of nature. When there is a problem in the human body, it means that the laws, or patterns, of nature are broken. Nature already has ways to fix problems within them. If we can develop a machine or technology that can make nature go back to the patterns it had, we can realize the dream of longevity. This is the way to realize human happiness. How can we utilize the innate patterns nature has? Invention means creating something convenient for people using the laws of nature. In other words, inventions have a close relation to human happiness. Invention is discovering something that exists in nature but was not noticed before and making a machine or technology with it to raise the quality of life. Inventions are relatively easy to make when we discover patterns in solids constituting nature. Neuroscience not only studies what people think by analyzing patterns in the brain but is also actively conducts research into avatar technology that connects the human brain and computer. The brain makes a constant pattern of electrical signals depending on what one is thinking or doing. If we can analyze the patterns of the electrical signals, we will be able to greatly improve the quality of our lives. For example, we can make wheelchairs that can be maneuvered just by thinking about it and robots that can go into the battlefield or scenes of fire on behalf of humans. We can also utilize artificial muscles that react sensitively to electrical signals and develop biologically inspired robots that are similar to humans. Human genes also have patterns. Humans have 22 pairs of autosomes and a pair of elasome. Such small DNA that can only be seen through high-performance microscopes have all the information of a living organism from birth to death. DNA is a blueprint of living organisms. Life scientists expect to be able to solve all the secrets of human birth, aging, sickness, and death by finding out all the patterns within the DNA. Recently, new forms of genetic engineering products with a compact size but high performance are being developed using the DNA. However, most people find DNA and RNA confusing. Should the two be understood as the same concept, or as two completely different things? The structure of DNA and RNA's sugar molecules have phosphate acids attached to the base. The chemical structure of the two are so similar they are hard to tell apart. A closer look shows that the one of the carbon molecules that makes up DNA's sugar molecule has a hydrogen molecule attached to it. A combination of oxygen and hydrogen, a hydroxyl group, is attached in the RNA structure. RNA is unstable compared to DNA because the hydroxyl group is more chemically reactive. When a cell is divided into two daughter cells through cell division, it is very important that the genetic information is transferred safely. DNA is preferred to RNA as a gene, as it is more chemically stable. RNA molecules are less flexible than DNA molecules. This flexibility plays a big role when there is an error during the process of copying genetic information. That is, DNA can be cloned more easily than RNA. Also, while DNA is made up of adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, RNA has uracil instead of thymine. Although DNA is safer, it can still be damaged due through chemical reactions. When uracil appears in the process of copying genetic information, there is no way of identifying whether it is a damaged gene or a gene that had already existed with RNA. To prevent this, DNA, which saves genetic information, uses a thymine base, a slightly modified form of uracil. For these practical reasons, most living organisms prefer DNA rather than RNA as their gene. When we closely observe plants over a long period of time, we can see that it dances in the form of a life spiral pattern. The shape of growth extending outwards in a golden ratio is called a golden spiral. The golden ratio is a special mathematical model that appears in nature all the time. The pattern observed here is the Fibonacci sequence, where each number is the sum of two numbers preceding it. Johannes Kepler was an astronomer who said that the array of numbers according to which leaves are arranged in displays a spiral patterns. He said the same number pattern appears in the petals of flowers. Leonardo da Vinci also discovered the leaf arrangements in plants make up a spiral pattern. These patterns are called phyllotaxis. Phyllotaxis can be seen not only in nucleotides, the unit molecules that make up nucleic acids, but also in rabbit reproduction, pine cones, cacti, snowflakes, and more. Structuralized patterns appear naturally in nature. Biotechnology scientists in nanotechnology use the term self-assembly to describe how compounds, like hexagonal complexes, are made during the early stages of DNA formation. In nanotechnological engineering, carbon nanotubes show how hexagonal honeycomb structures form. On the surface, nature seems to work effortlessly, but it is constantly creating sequences of geometric figures. We can see that nature is accurate and very efficient. The structure of DNA and the shape of honeycombs are shaped like bubbles because of nature chooses the method that takes up the least amount of energy for maximum efficiency. It fills up a space of a specific shape and only allowing just enough space for material to settle. Spiral patterns allow plants with the pattern to expose themselves as much as possible to insects for pollination. To get as much sun and water as possible, they extend their branches and roots as far as possible. Carnivorous birds use spiral patterns to find prey. They can hunt most effectively when flying in a spiral pattern. Just as everyone has different fingerprints, humans all have unique patterns alongside common patterns. Biometric authentication is a technology that uses unique patterns that individuals have. Fingerprint readers and iris recognition systems allow for the verification of individual identities without IDs. Fingerprints and irises do not change over the course of a person's life and are nearly impossible to copy. This quality makes them the most secure among all forms of biometric authentication. Biometric authentication is not just limited to body parts. The technology of determining who a person is by studying the patterns of how the person walks, makes unconscious gestures, or has patterns in handwritings are being actively studied. While voice is not visible to the eye, voice recognition technology that determines patterns as voices has also reached significant levels.